Hello and welcome to the Shifting the Paradigm webinar series, where we build community knowledge, skills, confidence and understanding of child sexual exploitation. We hope that you find this webinar beneficial.
To be here. I am very glad to be doing this presentation in my own extended family. There's been child sexual exploitation, and one of the things that I recognized over the years and decades that have followed is that there was, for the target, I call them targets because they were targeted. There was not a lot of real understanding of exactly how that conversational grooming happened. And there was not enough release from the shame that we all feel really when we've been groomed or conned. A release of shame from having been subjected to that process and the consequences. So we've already done the acknowledgement to country, so I'm just going to get right into it. So conversational grooming today is going to be addressing these 4 different points. Understanding the dynamics, learn how conversational tactics are employed, recognizing the signs, developing intervention skills, and expanding awareness. However, I can't tell you enough that this webinar is only an hour. The book that I have written will supplement it greatly. So I encourage you to not just rely on this webinar, but to actually access the book, because it will really fill out any details that are just impossible to do in 1 hour. So conversational grooming is a universal vulnerability. That's something we all really need to remember. It's not limited to abusive relationships or exploitation, although conversational grooming is abusive and it is exploiting. But it's something we're all vulnerable to, and it does happen everywhere. We're recognizing this frees those of us who have been or are being conversationally controlled and groomed from shame. It was never weakness, but the careful co-opting of our human relational instincts, and that's what makes it so abusive, is that we are co-opted by conversational grooming. Now, I'm not going to go through this slide in its entirety. It's to show you the various aspects of the world where grooming occurs. Conversational grooming occurs in DV, in coercive control, in sexual exploitation and grooming, in trafficking and colonization, in cults and extremist groups, in toxic workplaces, in political manipulation and propaganda, in religious or spiritual abuse, in educational systems, in healthcare and institutional settings. It may happen differently in each setting, but nonetheless, underpinning the use of conversational grooming in each of those contexts is the same tactics and the same kind of ways of hooking someone in and then controlling them. So this is recorded, and I'm also happy to send around the PowerPoint. So don't feel like you have to get your head around this slide. It's got more detail than what's required. It's just to show you it's everywhere. And the themes and the tactics and the agendas are pretty much the same. So one of the things that I actually teach is that conversational grooming and control is like a spider's web. And it's not just simply a pattern of words. It's a process rooted in a very powerful attitudinal stance, which I'll go into. In high-level conversational control, grooming weaves a kind of spider's web around the target, one that becomes harder to escape the longer it is allowed to form. So who's shaping the rules of engagement? We are culturally trained to overlook patterns in how people speak, steer, silence, or pressure a target, and we zoom in to focus instead on details about the target, such as judging or blaming. For example, in the early days of domestic violence research, they used to focus in on the target and talk about, why are you staying? Why are you attracted to these men? It was zooming in on all the wrong details and not useful. But what was ignored was the conversational patterns and dynamics, and we reduce complex relational harm to character flaws or platitudes. But the only thing that this does is protect the controller, isolates the target, and reinforces the very patterns that need to be named. So zooming out asks, who is setting the rules of engagement and how are they doing it? And when you look at the whole spider's web, that's much more how it tells the story, much more than just focusing on a little part of it. So why this matters? People who are being conversationally groomed often struggle to explain what's happening to them, especially when there's no yelling, no visible abuse, and no clear incident to point to. This makes them vulnerable to manipulation, judgment, and shame from others who don't recognize or understand the very subtle dynamics of conversational control. So, for example, in intimate relationships, you get common comments like someone can be conversationally groomed in intimate relationships. They're controlled and groomed. And you might get comments like, why don't you just leave? You're too sensitive. They didn't mean it like that. And it hurts because it ignores the slow emotional disorientation and conversational grooming that undermines confidence and clarity. And it hurts when people say that in friendships, like maybe you just need better boundaries, because it frames the person as the problem instead of seeing the conversational dynamics, which are much more explaining of the spider's web that's being woven. So let's take a closer look now at the theory of conversational control and how it underpins conversational grooming. Let's get down into the nuts and bolts of this. So, are we having a conversation or a power struggle? We have the right to conversational equality. We all do. We have the right to that. It is a human right. And this is the fundamental human right which is overpowered by the conversational groomer. They do not believe in conversational equality. They do not want acknowledgement of each other's conversational rights. They do not want to have equal input. They do not want the fact that no tactics are used. They do not want a win-win. They want a win-lose. They avoid a win-lose avoided where one person is coming off second best. They do not want that. What they want is to win. And they do not want a win-win, a compromise or common ground. They don't want that. So conversational quality is made up of those characteristics. And in an equal dynamic, they are sought. We seek each other's input. We seek the lack of tactics. We don't want tactics. We seek a win-win. We avoid a win-lose. And we've got conversational equality. And our conversational rights to be heard and seen are attended to. It's quite a simple idea. But in conversational control, what happens instead is the conversational controller, the one who wants to decide on how the conversation goes, they decide on where, what, when, and how we discuss something. Now, they do this carefully. They will use unfair conversational tactics to get you to defer. They will manage the conversation to their benefit and not to ours, not to yours, not to mine, to their benefit. They will manage it. They tend to do this in some parts of the relationship and not others. It's not necessarily every time, but it's enough of the time that they coerce somebody into their way of being and what they're wanting. They may be very unaware of it and they're all very practiced at it. A conversational groomer, someone who grooms a child into sexual exploitation, for example, is extremely practiced at it. Someone who does conversational control in a relationship or a friendship from time to time, they're often unaware of it. And there's everything in between. There's a whole continuum here of how much conversational control someone will use. So you've got the difference there between conversational equality and conversational control. And just straight away, you can see that the person who's experiencing a degree of conversational control, a pattern of it from people important in their lives, such as a teacher or a friend or a relative or someone they're in relationship with, somebody who wants to groom them into being useful, you can see how eventually that conversational control is going to be the dominant form of communication. Because if they really wanted conversational equality, it wouldn't happen. So conversational control can look like, I will decide if we will talk. I decide when we talk. I decide for how long we talk. I decide on what topic we will talk about. I decide when the talk is over. I decide on the tone of the talk. I will get you to give in to me. I will not collaborate. I'll manage and direct the conversation to my benefit and at the expense of you and the equality of our relationship. Now, conversational equality is the opposite of that. That's where those things don't happen, and it's a joint and mutual agreement and decision as to how the conversation goes. But in conversational control, this is used very cleverly. It's not obvious. It's just very clever. Who decides on the rules of engagement? Now, the middle column is very important to my theory of conversational control because that's where someone is with you in the conversation. They want a win-win with you. They want it to be right for both of you. It's a lovely feeling when we're with somebody who's in the middle column with you, who's in the middle ground with you, is another way of putting it. Then what's going to happen is you're going to both be seeking emotional connection. You're going to both foster civility. You're going to both promote equal speaking time. You're going to both converse as an equal. Or if there's a hierarchy, teacher to a student, for example, you will converse really well using that power imbalance appropriately. You'll aim for win-win outcomes. You'll contribute to fair agreements. You'll avoid using tactics. You'll respect the other's conversational rights. You'll seek relational justice. You'll repair and apologize. You'll grow and evolve the relationship. And that's really the only way that that can happen. So as a way of understanding that conversational control is about avoiding that middle column, that could be very helpful. So a lot with my clients, a lot of whom have experienced incredible exploitation, the middle column was never available to them with that person, but they didn't quite realizing it because it masquerades as if it's available, but it's not. So I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail now. So the other columns are the arcing down column. These are the tactics where somebody is not with you as they are in the middle column. They turn away from you. The middle column is with you. The arcing up column is where they turn against you. So they're reacting against you. So a bit more information. In the arcing down column, the tactics are used to get you to cater to them. And they use that by conveying disappointment to distress, somewhere in that continuum. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. so that you can do it by conveying an attitude. So let's look at the arcing down column. Just an indifferent, disengaged, distracted, or bored attitude will have an effect. But that attitude in the arcing up column is different, because those tactics in the arcing up column are used to get you to submit to their approval or disgust. It's a really nice, easy way to divide all the thousands and millions of tactics that we are capable of conversationally into the ones that get you to cater to them and emotionally cater to them, if not in other ways, or submit to them. So when someone's arcing up at you, they're going to have an underlying attitude of, contempt, being snide, secretive, fault-finding, unempathic, looking to catch you out. They don't have to say anything, they just convey that attitude. And our body language gives it away. So let's go into the behaviors. So tactics used to get you to cater to their disappointment or distress in behaviors are, for example, turning away from you, literally, and being silent, freezing you out, leaving the room, ignoring you, right? Those sorts of little behaviors are dead giveaways of whether it's an arcing up or an arcing down tactic. In the arcing up column, the behaviors used to get you to submit are more intimidating. They use postures and gestures such as hands on hips, menacing facial contortions, gritted teeth, glaring, or even just slightly glaring or slight facial contortions. It's just enough to get you to submit, and they know where you will. What is said is the tactic used, the verbal tactic used, where they might refuse to engage if they're arcing down, stop talking, be sulky, monosyllabic, evasive, half answers, confusing, making you work really hard. When tactics are used to get you to submit, arcing up, they will trivialize what you say, minimize, complicate, circularize, use monologuing, use questions, critiques, shutting you down, interrupting you, blaming, shaming, etc. They'll use all those kinds of tactics. And sometimes it's not very spectacular. Sometimes it's not sensational. Sometimes it's quite minimalistic. But these tactics work, and they work really, really well. And there's certain reasons why these sorts of tactics work and in what order they might work. What's happening, though, is that middle column is just avoided. So the conversation deteriorates to arcing down tactics up to arcing up tactics. And every conversational groomer has their own unique way of using the arcing down tactics and then switching to arcing up tactics, depending upon the target's vulnerabilities and what they know the target will cater to or submit to. So it's a real relationship betrayal. It's a conversational grooming uses conversational control like this to get someone to cater or submit to what they want. And it's really clever. And some of the conversational groomers are so clever that they can do it in front of other people and they're not picked up. One of the big things about this is that the tactics used to get you to cater to them and their disappointment and distress, because they don't want you to, if you're a target, you don't want someone to be disappointed or distressed with you, so you're more likely to cater. The trouble is when someone uses any of those arcing down tactics against you, the normal person goes into one of these or a mixture of these: confusion, anxiety, obligation, guilt, shame, self-doubt. And then we're more amenable. Straight away, we are not grounded. We are so much more amenable to whatever happens next. We're off balance. It's unfair and it's abusive, but this is what happens. Tactics to get you to submit, though, they result in the same mixture. It might be different, but it's the same. The idea is to knock you off your balance and to make you more amenable. And I watch this happen all the time. For example, in TV programs, it drives me nuts. It's very common. So I'm going to move on now and just say that when we understand that kind of framework and introduce terms like arcing up and arcing down in the middle column, it helps people name up invisible dynamics. And it allows people to say things like, I wasn't overreacting, I was being emotionally cornered. It's not that I'm sensitive, it's the way they talk that shuts me down. And it replaces shame and confusion with language, clarity, and voice. And that is so critical to breaking the hold that a conversational controller and a conversational groomer can have on an individual. That submitting and catering is critical because we will all do it. And we all have people and tactics that we will submit to or cater to just by virtue of being human. It's just that sometimes the consequences aren't that great. For me personally, I know I am particularly sensitive to being to someone arcing up at me in the form of criticism, and straight away I can feel myself becoming more amenable and getting anxious straight away. I'm getting better at it, and I know I can get out of it quicker, but it's one way that I have been conversationally groomed and controlled in my life is by criticism. So here's an example of arcing down. Peter could win a medal for sulking to get his way. For a long time, I'd put up with it and consoled him, even though he was just upset because I'd said he'd hurt me. He started to cry a few times. I had a chat with him about spending more time with the kids. Peter said he had no energy since I split up with him. He was the one who cheated on me, and our kids are wondering what they've done wrong for him to be so absent. So there's someone who does a classic arcing down at certain times in order to get people's empathy, but refusing to acknowledge his own role in things. Right now, he doesn't just arc down. It's just a classic example that came through with a client. And here's a classic example of arcing up. He didn't like me to challenge him, looks, snarls, tones of voices. I used to hate the feeling they would create in me, fear, rejection. If I said this is what was happening for me, I'd be, fobbed off. Don't be so dramatic. You're being stupid or whatever, right? At you. Not with you, not turning away from you, at you. Arcing up is at you. What a stupid thing to say, or something like that. You'd be accused of being dramatic or over the top. What about you? You do this. What about when you? He would never answer me without accusing me. And that's arcing up. It's it's a really obvious example of arcing up. But just to give you an idea, there are, if you like, there is different kinds of arcing up that are very subtle. That's a really not non-subtle, really obvious arcing up tactic. So there's the win-win column. We want that column. Now, everyone has the right to that column and to be having conversations in that column, and all around the world, it's avoided for different reasons. So what we've got is, where they're with you and there's a handshake, but generally conversational control, someone will avoid that column and arc up on you and arc down on you, and they'll do it in different ways. Some people are particularly skillful at getting someone to repeatedly cater to them by arcing down. Some people are more skillful at arcing up, very quietly sometimes, not very sensationally, not very obviously, but they're very skillful at getting you to submit, and they use one of the arcing up tactics. Now, I've listed a lot of these in my book of what those tactics are. They're very common. So let's go through it a bit more. There's the middle column. It's not going to happen in conversational grooming. It does not happen. It is not there, except maybe at the very beginning. but we'll go into that a bit later, to hook you in, to hook us in for the needs that we have as human beings for belonging, security, understanding, to be seen. We might get hooked in by the use of that middle column. But the arcing down tactics to get you to cater to them, for an example, being indifferent, acting distracted, refusing to engage, right? And so we try so hard to deal with that. Next thing is they'll just arc up. They will be sarcastic. They have that sarcastic quality about them. They'll come too close to you. They'll get in your face. They may interrogate you. They're at you. They want you to submit. And then the next thing is that they will change tactic and maybe use another arcing up tactic, be contemptuous, glare at you, scoff at you, but then arc down again. Now, very rarely does it happen very neatly between arcing up and arcing down like that, but that's an example. Now, it's like a tennis match. So sometimes they'll use a selection of arcing down tactics. Sometimes they'll use a selection of arcing up tactics in whatever order works to destabilize you and to get you to cater or submit, because they will attune it to whatever your personality is. Wherever you can't stand seeing someone's disappointment or distress, you will cater to their arcing down. Wherever you can't abide seeing them being disapproving or disgusted with you, you will submit. We all do it. Because what those tactics do is to put us into a state of being either anxious, obligated, confused, guilty, shamed, or self-doubting, and we're very amenable. Now, with children, this is what a conversational groomer will do at the beginning. They will get them in with the middle column in because they sense the child is vulnerable and has some needs. And then after that, it's a process of using arcing up and arcing down, and the child doesn't want the relational rupture. So they will cater and submit. So I'm going to just go through how this works again. They arc up or arc down. They use disappointment, distress, disapproval, or disgust. And just looking at those words, there's a whole range of ways that disappointment can increase to distress. There's a whole lot of emotions in the middle of that, but the thing is, it's an emotion that they want to convey that really almost traumatizes you into catering to them. Or there's a whole range of behaviors between disapproval and disgust. It's like a continuum that force us into submitting to them. So we go into, when someone does that, we go into, I'm just trying to move that box out of the way, obligation, confusion, fear, guilt, or shame. We're very amenable. Well, we've already lost our base. Uh-oh. Nothing. Oh, there it goes. And then we seek, and this is where it goes. This is where it happens. We seek their understanding, their reassurance, their permission, their approval, their agreement. We seek it. We are not top dog at the moment. We are seeking something that, of course, a conversational groomer is going to withhold until they get what they want. But the trouble is, we don't realize that, and we keep thinking, I've got to get this right. What's wrong? What's happened? There's no, we're not connected anymore. It doesn't feel good. And the harder we seek their understanding, approval, agreement, permission, or reassurance, the harder they withhold it. So we start, in order to get anything like their reassurance or approval or understanding, we start justifying, arguing, defending, or explaining ourselves. In the name of either catering or submitting, we try to make it right. But the conversational groomer is standing there knowing that that's what you're going to do. They know this, they work this out, they know it, and they know that this, as soon as you start doing that, they've really got you. Now, they're just going to go back and forth and make you work extremely hard, but then they'll just start up or down at you again in order to really cement the fact that you're in the wrong and that you should be doing what they say. And that's how it all becomes so complicated for a young person who hasn't got a hope in heaven of working any of this out. They just know that somehow or other, the person who'd been kindly to them at the beginning, where things felt like they were in the middle column, all of a sudden has got cracks and ruptures in it that they're very worried about having caused. And so they will keep going around and around that cycle until eventually the conversational groomer will ease up and let them back in, so to speak. And it's an incredible grip to have on a young person's emotional life and psyche, but it happens also everywhere in the world. This is what happens when you watch different leaders lead. They do a lot of arcing up or arcing down tactics. They do a lot of this exact same stuff in order to control a conversation. I have noticed, though, that of late, when they're being interviewed, a lot of them are doing a lot better because they realize it doesn't come across well. So grooming begins with hooks that make someone feel seen or valued. Now, we all have the desire to be seen or valued, to be taken notice of, to be talked with. We do need to please, we need to belong, we need to feel special, we need to feel useful. And that's just a small number of the hooks that a groomer can use, a conversational controller can use. There's so many of those. So, and then arcing down tactics use a target's fear of creating disappointment, sadness, and distress, or a target's fear of incurring disapproval, criticism, or disgust. And that's kind of how they get in on somebody's psyche, because they know what you really want to avoid creating in them or incurring in them. As the conversational groomer, they know that. And they also look to where you're vulnerable and what particular need of yours is not being met. So in my family, after a family breakdown, someone in my extended family had no protection. There was no parent really overseeing her. And she was groomed by a high school teacher using exactly this. Noticed her need to be seen in particular, and used a judicious blend of arcing up and arcing down to get her to be his sexual partner. And he was a married teacher at school. And because he could see what hooked her. Now, we're talking 50 years ago. In that 50 years, I have watched that extended family member struggle with how she let that happen. I have heard people say about her in my family, well, she liked it. And the most ridiculous things that I have ever heard, completely failing to zoom out and look at the bigger spider's web of how these things occur, how they happen, instead of focusing on the tiny bit of the spider's web, which gives you no information at all. But it's very easy to blame somebody rather than to look at the bigger picture as to how all this occurred. Because she finally understood a bit more about how she'd been hooked and how she had a little bit more, she took him to court. It was many decades later, and lost because she was excoriated in the cross-examination. But the thing is, she did take him to court. We're not good at these things. We do not, even the court didn't really fully understand how she had been groomed. So a conversational groomer gains influence. So they detect where someone's vulnerabilities lie in relationships, such as their fears of disappointing or incurring disapproval, and what they'll cater to and what they'll submit to. And quite frankly, this is common. Now, in most unequal relationships that I've ever had the disappointment to work with, I can see that there's usually an imbalance, a power imbalance that's come about because someone caters and submits far more because they've been controlled into it, because they feared if they didn't cater, they feared the distress of that person, even though it was quite manipulative. And if they didn't submit, they really feared the disapproval. They feared being looked at with disgust and contempt. They feared that, and rightly so in a way, because it's relationally incredibly unjust. It's betrayal. It's a betrayal of somebody to never be in the middle column and to not be in there often enough for the relationship to grow and evolve. You're actually betraying that person. But I've done it myself. I have to think about, for us all as practitioners, we have to recognize as well, this is not my favorite work. What sort of arcing up attitudes, behaviors, or tactics have the effect of making you submit? And what sort of arcing down attitudes, behaviors, or tactics have the effect of making you cater? And like I told you before, the ones that really make me feel very, out of my depth and to definitely give in is criticism, or someone looking at me with a certain contemptuous look, as if like, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that? And I can really react to it. So it's very, very subtle. And people, once we know that about ourselves, and once we can understand that, sometimes we are submitting far more than what we need to, or catering far more than what we need to, and request a return to the middle column, then if we're in an unequal relationship, that can kind of work, but depending upon the level of the inequality in the relationship, it won't. So I'm going to go into a bit more of that. So the sort of grooming, conversational grooming, is really the strength of it and the ability of it is dependent upon having a certain attitudinal style. And it's one of superiority, entitlement, and adversariality. So a superior attitudinal style is like, I govern you. I'm the boss. I'm the one who says, I'm the one who knows. And that leads to a lack of concern with or empathy for the target's feelings, perspective, emotional intimacy, or equality within the relationship. The middle column is not of great interest. An entitled attitudinal style, you serve me. Now, these are not separate styles. These three styles, superior, entitled, and adversarial, are all interlinked. They are the one attitudinal style. There's just three parts to it. So an entitled attitudinal style is like, you serve me. For example, I have the expectations of one-way privilege and benefits, which creates double standards and double binds for the target. So it's okay for him to shut me down, but if I try to shut him down, it'd be dangerous. That's a double standard. Or a double bind is never being able to get it right. Just, for example, if we go out and I'm having a good time and I'm talking to people and being free, I'll get told that I'm a bit flirty, and do I have to behave like that? It was embarrassing. And then being a good girl, the next time they go out might be quiet and refrain from doing that and not say a lot. So why, when we go out, you have to be so boring? In other words, you can't win. Either way, you're always doing something wrong. It's like a double bind. There's a huge network of double standards and double binds in conversational grooming and in coercive control and in any grooming process. An adversarial attitudinal style means you will never have a conversation in the middle column. It's always, I'll win and I'll be right. I know what I'm doing. It leads to a fault-finding, competitive communication and behavioral style, and it's not prone to self-reflection, compromise, change, or growth. So if someone has got this type of attitudinal style and it's constant, they are going to be able to conversationally groom anybody to wherever they want, because they don't actually have the concern for your feelings or perspective or whether something's right for you. They expect you to cater to them and submit to them. They actually expect that. And they're adversarial, so you can't ever sort anything out because they will always want to be win and to right. This is extremely common. It's an extremely common attitudinal style. So, for example, superior, I govern you. In my counselling room, this is the sort of thing I hear. We're not equals. I'm not a person to them. He puts himself on a pedestal. I'm a servant, a slave, a worker. He thinks I belong to him. He's in charge. His expectations are my guiding light. I must conform to their standards, needs, and wants. I do all the adapting and the compromising. There are rules and they can change every day. Now, this has come from people who have spent years unpacking how they were groomed into a relationship that was so utterly controlling of them and where there was such a power imbalance. And that was because they were up against someone with a superior and entitled attitudinal style, and as well as that, they would be adversarial. In other words, no access to the middle column, because he always wins, I always lose. It's never going to be relevant to him, so why waste my breath? Obviously, I've spoken to a lot of women. They are competitive, they're not collaborative. If I stop feeding his needs, the relationship gets worse and he retaliates. Now, all of these comments were around coercive control. These comments also relate to conversational grooming and child exploitation. The children are not people to them. The controller, the groomer uses the child as someone who belongs to him, who needs to cater to him, needs to submit to him, who needs to do the adapting and the compromising, who needs to know the rules, who needs to conform, who needs to understand the lack of actual collaboration and kind of go with that, needs to feed the needs of the groomer. So it sort of encapsulates just how complex this spider's web is. And, I've talked about this for years now. I still get caught in it. I still suddenly realize, oh my God, I've fallen for it again. It's that strong. And some people are very good at doing this in a way that's not particularly noticeable. So let's go to what I call the 4 levels of conversational control that underpins conversational grooming. There's one level where there's none, it never happens. The middle column's always used or returned to. That's really, really unusual. Level number 1, where it's occasional and inadvertent. A lot of relationships have conversational control, arcing up, arcing down, carry on. But they have access to the middle column. And both of them get back into the middle column quite regularly. So there's no major consequences in level 1. In level 2, it might be certain issues can't be discussed well for all kinds of reasons, but there is quite a lot of access to the middle column. Level 3, it's getting dangerous. There's too many issues affected by conversational control. There is high stress. The relationship is unfair and likely abusive, and there's some levels of control. Well, there's high levels of control, actually. And the level 4 is coercive control. The whole relationship is drenched in it, right? The pattern I've just described to you is coercive control. It is the pattern of grooming somebody into submission, into giving more and never being in the middle column, to providing services. So the middle column is always available in the level 0, 1, or 2. It's available. It's never available 3 and 4. Never in 4, maybe in 3, but not very. I'd say level 3 is a worry. There might be occasional unfair conversational tactics, themes, and agendas in the lower levels of conversational control, but in the higher levels, it's comprehensive. The tactics are comprehensive and clever, and so are the themes and the agendas, which are in my book, but not in this presentation. There'll be maybe in level 0 or 1 or 2, there might be the occasional use of a superior, entitled, and adversarial attitudinal style. Like sometimes they come across like that. But in level 3 and 4, it's fixed. That attitudinal style is fixed. It's not going to change. And that makes that person impossible to have an equal relationship with, one where there's access to the middle column, one that is not exploitative. So someone who exploits a child is doing exactly number 4. Middle column's never available except to groom, except to hook in. But it's masquerading. There's a comprehensive pattern of unfair conversational tactics, themes, and agendas. There's a very fixed, superior, entitled, and adversarial attitudinal style. So no child has got the wherewithal to deal with that. No child. Barely, not many people either. Now, there's all this talk about narcissism now, which is actually really helpful. What a narcissist does, exactly what happens in coercive control. It's the same process. Same process. So in coercive control and in any process of exploitation, you've got the superior, entitled, and adversarial attitudinal style at the core. And then you've got the relationship, and you can divide that into all kinds of things. Now, for coercive control, I've divided it into physical relationship, communication patterns, social arrangements, financial arrangements, sexual relationship, and public portrayal. For a child with a groomer, you would divide the relationship differently. Nonetheless, it's the relationship. At the core of it is the tactics of conversational control, arcing up, arcing down, arcing up, arcing down, arcing down, arcing down, arcing down, arcing up, arcing down, avoidance of the middle column. There's consequences for each part of the relationship, and all those consequences add up. And that is what a lot of people do not understand about exploitation. And they will make those comments like, what, why don't you just leave? They will zoom in on little details and forget to zoom out, which is really the only way that you can get the entire spider's web of this. So, disrupting conversational grooming, a practitioner guide. Normalize without minimizing. Many people don't realize how powerful conversational pressure can be until they're very deep in it. Name the pattern, not the person. Reclaim the middle column. You are allowed to ask questions, to take time to say no. I mean, clearly this is not the sort of thing you would say to a child, but to anyone being exploited who has some agency, this can really disrupt the pattern of conversational grooming and make clear the consequences of that. Reclaiming their right to the middle column, their conversational rights, and what conversational equality looks like is an extremely powerful thing to teach a child, youth, or an adult. Track their internal signals so that they can work out, what makes them frightened, what makes them over-explain, what makes them seek reassurance. What is that about? Practice disruption scripts. Now, in my book, I've got a whole response framework that can be used to disrupt conversational grooming and control. And the most important thing is repairing the narrative. You're not selfish or weak. You're being trained to protect their comfort instead of your voice. You are being trained to protect their comfort. They don't want to know about where you're at. So to support the client to rebuild boundaries, trust their instincts because their bodies will have told them, and unlearn that internalized guilt and shame is the big one. So in sum, conversational control is the invisible spider's web and scaffolding by which grooming happens. Arcing up, arcing down, arcing up, arcing down, no middle column. Conversations are used to shape, pressure, destabilize, and trap, avoiding fairness, collaboration, and mutuality. And at its heart is a superior, entitled, and adversarial attitude that turns dialogue into domination. So that's my book there that you can buy from Amazon. There's more about the agendas and the themes that underpin conversational control. It's just impossible to include that in an hour. You can learn about the response framework and understand the range of effects and even more about how conversational control works. I've given you nuts and bolts, but that will fill it out for you. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for attending this webinar. Please feel free to share our resources and let us know if you have any feedback. If you would like to learn more about our program, visit projectparadigm.com.au and be sure to tune in to the next webinar.